you had a great op-ed out this week, and I feel like sometimes you sound the alarm and the rest of people need to hear this. So let me just, the headline grabbed it for me, which is generally speaking how most people get their news anyway. It says, "Take it from me, Republicans. Kamala Harris is a strong candidate. Don't underestimate her." Why?
Well, because I think first of all, she liberates the entire left and the entire Democratic machine, which had become very depressed because of the decay of Joe Biden. So there was an enormous, it's like watching sort of a spring. I mean, there's an enormous buildup of desire that suddenly poured to her advantage. You see it in the fundraising. Second, she triggers among an entire segment of Black women, sororities across the country, which are virtually outside of Republican awareness. And the very first week, she had a telephone call with 40,000 sorority members nationwide. So she's triggering groups that Biden couldn't trigger. And she's going to have virtually unanimous propaganda media backing that will be loving and iconic and build her into a heroine and attempt to smother Trump at a level that I'm not sure the Trump team has yet fully appreciated.
And I agree with you on that. And I'm glad you said it because people think what you say matters a lot more than what I say most of the time. I feel like we on our side, not all of us, I saw Ben Carson comment on this, you commented on this. I don't think our side fully appreciates, it's not that she's a great candidate, it's that everybody on the Dem side, the media, these sororities, whatever, are finally like, great, we got rid of Biden. We were concerned about his mental acuity, his fitness for office. And she's just the vehicle now. And people on our side don't appreciate that they just wanted something new. They got something new, and now they can be energized and focused.
Well, look, I mean, she beat the incumbent district attorney in San Francisco. She won the attorney general's office statewide in California, the largest state in the country. She won the U.S. Senate seat in California. She was a terrible presidential candidate and an adequate vice presidential candidate. And I think we cue off of things like her laugh. I mean, I have friends who literally can't listen to her because they're so unnerved by just her voice. But I think that's not the view of the majority of Americans. And I think that they're going to have a first-rate political team, better than the Biden team, in my judgment. And if they can turn this into a referendum on Trump, they can win. If they can turn it into a personality fight, they can win. If, on the other hand, it's a choice between a San Francisco radical and people who can't see America going down that road, she'll lose very badly. I mean, she could become a Governor Dukakis, or she could become Barack Obama. And I don't think you can say right now which of those two futures exists.
And is that choice hers or Trump's? Meaning, does she define herself more by how she presents to the American people, or how Trump maybe attacks her and presents her has more to do with that?
It's almost entirely Trump's. And that's a challenge because his instinct will be to be personal, and he will run a real risk of losing if this is a personal race. If it's a policy race, he will beat her by a huge margin.
But that's what I don't understand. There's days in which Trump's a smart guy. I mean, like, say what, you can be the biggest Trump hater. The guy is a brilliant marketer, right? And what I find sometimes so interesting is that when you're marketing a product and someone walks in to you and says, hey, the more that we say this is great tasting and less calories, it outperforms the market every time. Trump is told by everybody from you to Sean Hannity to myself that, hey, your policies, your record was hands down better than their record. You closed the border. There was more prosperity. There was less chaos overseas. We were energy independent. The list goes on and on and on. And then he'll default sometimes just to say, you know, they said I shouldn't be nice, but I'm not going to. I mean, why? Why do you think he does that?
Well, I mean, first of all, you lived it in the White House. And I remember one time I was there having lunch with him, and you came in, and he told you exactly what you were supposed to do when you went out and saw the press, which may or may not have been the right thing to do, but he was the boss,
Right.
and he had won the presidency, so he had certain right to say what he wanted.
That's true.
So you've dealt with this directly and intimately. My theory of it is that it all goes back to page 6 in the New York Post. That when Trump came over from Queens, he was never fully accepted by the New York aristocracy, and no matter how rich he got. And the leading gossip column was page 6. And he learned very early that if page 6 attacked him, he had to counterattack within 24 hours. So he has a very pugnacious. I mean, I think he enjoyed it. We those of us from the hinterland sometimes forget that he's a genuine New Yorker. That being involved in brawls just means you got to work that day. Because you fought your way through the subway and you fought your way through the elevator, and here you are at work. And in a normal person, you'd be exhausted, but as a New Yorker, it's just life. And so I think that's deep. It is so deeply ingrained in him to automatically counterpunch. And I think that the other part of it is when he took on his opponents, he discovered, I suspect a little to his surprise, he was up against 15 or 16 people, some of whom were pretty good national players. When the race began in 1915 or in 2015, Jeb Bush was clearly the front runner. And Jeb Bush was a remarkably good reform governor of Florida and maybe the best politician in the family. And he just annihilated them. And he did it by being personal. I mean, if you look at how he drove people out of the race, it was a series of unending personal attacks, which then he pivoted and basically did the same thing to Hillary. I mean, it was clearly the national consensus that Hillary would win, and she lost. And she lost in a campaign in which both sides got tough. He just got tougher. And so I think that background gives him a sense of instinctively attacking. And I think in this case, it's not to his advantage, because his really great strength here is the policy and values contrast, not the personality contrast. And she's younger. In many ways, as a national figure, she's fresher. So there's an interest about who she is that Trump's now been a national figure for 8 or 9 years. So in a sense, the newcomer now is her. Yeah. And I don't think that he has fully assimilated. I think that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivito understood it pretty rapidly. But getting Trump to understand it's harder because it goes against everything that he thought historically was his strength.
There's two things that I think of when you say that. Number one, everybody gave him advice, and myself included, during that 2016 cycle about what you were supposed to do. And then he would do it his way and be successful, whether it was the primary or the general. And I think there's a bit of, you geniuses over there, the professional class, tell me to do something, I do it my way and I win. So I really don't need to listen to you. That's number one. Number two, on the media, I got asked all the time, why does he still talk to the New York Times? And it harkens back to what you just explained better than I ever have, which is the sense of wanting the acceptance of your hometown paper and being like, I made it. I defeated all these odds in business, in show business, and now in politics. Give me a little respect. This guy from Queens who came over, and I think you put your finger on it. I think sometimes it's the answer is a lot more obvious than some of these pundits give credit for, because I do agree that looking back at how he won the primary and the general is exactly as you described. He won it. He did it his way on a personal level, and now he's going to go, so now you're going to tell me that I need to do some policy thing with Kamala Harris that I've shown before doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's faced with a bigger change than he's faced up till now. And look, I'm reasonably confident that, having watched him for a long time, that he will presently adjust. Because the one thing you have to say about him is, well, he's very stubborn. He does pay a lot of attention. He didn't keep The Apprentice on the air for, what was it, 13 years, as a hit show. And he didn't run the Miss Universe contest, and he didn't become successful building and marketing systems. Running, I think, 18 or 19 golf courses without paying a lot of attention to the customer. And I think he'll presently realize that he's currently on a track that's not going to work. Now,
well, the problem is there's two customers. The customer that, is buying his product, if you will, at the rallies loves when he says this. The customer that's going to determine the election, the 40, 50, 60,000 people in those 5 states, maybe doesn't buy that same thing.
Well, that's one way to think of it. I think the other way to think of it is he will instinctively understand that his profit margin is the people you just described. And I think it's a lot bigger number than that. And that presently he will have polls that indicate pretty clearly, if this is a personality contest, he has a real risk of losing because she's the new, younger personality, and she's going to have all of the propaganda media 100% for her. And that's going to require them to think through a system that's different. For most of the campaign for the nomination, he was remarkably disciplined. And I think he's going to have to go back to that. I also think there's a decompression. It's almost like coming up from diving too deep and coming up too fast. They were on Sunday morning on top of the world. He'd survived an assassination attempt. They'd had a relatively successful, you could argue very successful convention. They knew how to beat Biden. Biden was cheerfully not getting out. So at 9 or 10 o'clock Sunday morning, he was in a world where he could relax, knew exactly how to operate for the next 3 months, and it was going to be fine. And I remember when Callisto walked in and said to me, Biden just announced on X that he was withdrawing. My first thought was it was Babylon Bee. I said, you're kidding. And she said, go look at it. They just announced it on Fox. And so I think that there is a degree that he personally is going through right now of suddenly everything was in my grasp and now nothing is in my grasp and I've got to do it all over again.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think he's a little disoriented as a result of that. I mean, I think he would be beyond Superman not to be, but I also have a pretty high confidence. If this was early October, I'd be very worried.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of August, and candidly, I'm not too worried yet.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.